Everyone thinks they know what happened when the Berlin Wall fell. Dancing crowds, champagne toasts, freedom wins, but nobody talks about the morning after. November 10, 1989, East Berlin wakes up to a different problem. 173,000 unofficial collaborators are still eating breakfast at the same kitchen tables, still living next door to the people they betrayed, still showing up to the same jobs. What happens to the largest spy network in human history when the state that created it vanishes overnight? The Stasi recruited one informant for every 6.5 East German citizens. Teachers spying on students, doctors reporting on patients, husbands filing reports on wives, children watching parents. When the regime collapsed, these people didn't disappear. They became your new neighbors in unified Germany. If you value documented history of surveillance states and their aftermath, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Federal Commissioner for Stasi Records Archive established in 1991. And interviews conducted by journalist David Crawford, who exposed Stasi real estate assets and pension lists in 1990. Crawford's reporting, published in the Wall Street Journal and documented by the Foreign Policy and Focus Institute in 2014, provides unprecedented access to former Stasi officers and their post-reunification experiences. Now back to the information. October 3rd, 1990. German reunification becomes official. The Stasi has been dissolved for 8 months, but 200,000 former informants are still out there. No trials, no purges, no consequences. The files remain sealed in Berlin headquarters. Citizens storm the building. January 15th, 1990. They're not looking for revenge. They're trying to stop the shredding machines. Miles of documents getting destroyed every hour. The same neighbors who reported your conversations are now helping save the evidence. February 8th, 1990. The Stasi formally ceases to exist. 91,000 full-time employees lose their jobs. 173,000 informants just go home. West German Interior Minister Wolfgang Schäuble makes the calculation. Prosecute everyone and destabilize the country. Or let them walk and build unity. Germany chooses unity. The price tag for justice turns out to be civil war. Interior Minister Peter Michael Diestel puts it simply, there were only two types of truly innocent people in this system, the newborn and the alcoholic. The Stasi expected a deal, cash for cooperation. Franz Josef Strauss had paid East Germany before in 1983. 1 billion Deutsche Marks to dismantle automated tripwires along the wall. Former officers were told to stay in their barracks during the upheaval, wait for negotiations. Hans Modrow, East Germany's final leader, flies to Bonn expecting 10 to 15 billion marks as a thank you gift for opening the wall. Helmut Kohl says, no, the money never comes, the deal never happens, but nobody told the Stasi officers until it was too late to resist. January 2nd, 1992. The Stasi records law takes effect. Germans can request their files, see who spied on them, learn their neighbors' secrets. 2.75 million people apply to read their surveillance records, but an estimated 5.25 million East Germans have files waiting. More than half choose ignorance. They don't want to know which friends betrayed them, which family members filed reports. Some secrets are too dangerous for democracy. Here's what the files revealed. Your math teacher reported that you hummed Western songs. Your family doctor noted your capitalist sympathies during checkups. Your spouse documented your private political comments. Your teenage children filed monthly behavioral assessments. The grocery store clerk tracked which Western products you bought. The mailman photographed letters before delivery. The parish minister tape recorded confessions. The soccer coach evaluated your ideological fitness. Your coworkers measured political enthusiasm during break time conversations. Your downstairs neighbor collected scent samples from your trash for tracking dogs. Unofficial collaborators came in categories. Informants for security provided intelligence on specific targets. Societal collaborators monitored general populations. Leading informants recruited other spies. Contact persons maintained communication networks. Some worked for ideology, others for privileges. Many had no choice. 15-year-old Martin Schlaff becomes an Austrian businessman. Unknown at the time, he's a Stasi informant. After reunification, former Commander Herbert Kohler transfers 170 million marks to Schlaff's companies. Months later, Kohler gets a management position. High-ranking officers continue their careers in Schlaff's business empire. The German parliament investigates and concludes that Schlaff's companies played a crucial role in the Stasi's attempts to secure financial futures for agents and keep intelligence networks alive. The files office hires 490 people to process requests. 13 locations across Germany. Citizens line up for appointments. Researchers need background documentation to access records. Journalists get rejected unless they prove broader public interest. Politicians, parents get protection. Even informants, identities stay redacted unless they held public positions. Angela Merkel's file requests get denied every time. Privacy protection takes precedence. But archivist Karsten Jedlichka notes that if there were indications she was an informant, they would have surfaced by now. In 2009, investigators discover 70,000 current German government employees used to work for the Stasi, the secret police responsible for 200,000 political prisoners and approximately 1,000 deaths at the border. Former Stasi members are banned from public service jobs after reunification. Reality proves different. The Stasi Records Agency itself employs 79 former Stasi members as of 2009. 52 still work there. They're handling their own files. David Crawford publishes the first Stasi real estate list June 1990. 9,251 properties. Every East German newspaper predicts violence against exposed officers. No attacks happen. Crawford investigates alleged incidents. The New York Times reports 2 cases of violence citing former Interior Minister Peter Michael Diestel. Crawford sends statements from dismantling authorities to the Times. No confirmed incidents exist. East Germans don't become vigilantes. They become pragmatists. Former Stasi officers migrate to private security firms, real estate companies, business consulting. They use identical skills in capitalist markets. Surveillance becomes corporate intelligence. Networks become business contacts. Some become millionaires. Crawford notes that many informal spies, whose names weren't on central lists, worry about blackmail from former handlers for years. They stay in the same jobs, can't risk changing careers. Everyone else found new work. 5 years later, it's too late to start over. The reunification treaty creates legal immunity. Officers can only be prosecuted for crimes under East German law, not for doing their jobs. Wolfgang Schäuble explains this as accommodation to avoid never-ending trials. The law doesn't mention abuse of power or destroying a country. Victims find this unfair, but 91,000 former Stasi, plus hundreds of thousands of informants, represent too many Germans to punish without major social turmoil. Churches were heavily infiltrated, Protestant churches more than Catholic ones. Many ministers weren't part of the system and resisted, but leadership positions were filled with secret collaborators or people who decided to integrate the church within East German state control. Opposition movements met in churches, but church hierarchy wasn't really opposition. Some informal collaborators were under 18, 10,000 children spying on their families, parents discovering their teenagers filed reports, marriages discovering spousal betrayal, friendships learning about systematic documentation of private conversations. The Gauck Authority manages the files until 2021. Joachim Gauck becomes the first federal commissioner for Stasi records. His office handles 7 million applications for file access by 2015. Creates a digital portal with some records online. Living persons. Files remain restricted for privacy reasons. The website includes documentation about the 1953 uprising and Berlin Wall events. Visitors can research the surveillance state that monitored 1/3 of East Germany's population. Controversial discovery emerges in 2013. Sandra Pingel-Schliemann accidentally finds a 1977 Stasi directive on handling immigration petitioners. The secret instruction advised offices how to seize assets from people requesting exit permits, how to coerce them into quitting jobs, how to force false statements about voluntary resignation. Petitioners often waited months or years for permission to leave. During that time, they faced unemployment and harassment. Until this document's discovery, immigrants had difficulty proving involuntary job loss for Social Security claims in unified Germany. Former officers remained defensive about their service. Roland Jahn, who succeeded Gauck as records commissioner, notes that ex-Stasi members have become offensive rather than apologetic in recent years. They openly defend the East German system, claim the state only failed because of Western interference and Gorbachev's policies, present the Stasi as innocent civil servants rather than oppressive surveillance apparatus. Some Germans now consider former Stasi membership cool rather than shameful. Present-day reality check. Saying you belong to the Dutch Fascist Party, NSB, remains unacceptable. But mentioning Stasi service carries less stigma. Former members work in media, government, and business. They guard politicians, including Angela Merkel. Broadcast networks employ ex-intelligence officers. The scope of Stasi interference in private lives was colossal. Job promotions were impossible without Stasi approval. Every aspect of daily existence required surveillance clearance. December 2019, 89, citizens storm regional Stasi offices across East Germany, not for revenge, to prevent document destruction. The revolution saved 48,000 filing cabinets worth of evidence. Social activists and human rights defenders occupied headquarters and branch offices, stopped ongoing shredding The truth would have vanished into paper dust. If you value documented research about surveillance states like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment which city you're hearing this from. The script is researched and factual, using sources from the Federal Commissioner for Stasi records and investigative reporting by David Crawford, published in Foreign Policy and Focus in 2014. Crawford's access to former officers and pension records provides unique insight into post-reunification careers of surveillance personnel. Now back to the information. The Rosenholz files surface in unclear circumstances after the wall falls. CIA acquires microfilmed Stasi records containing 320,000 agent cards and 57,000 spy reports. Between 2001 and 2003, the United States transfers 380 CD-ROMs to the Stasi Records Agency. These files expose foreign intelligence operations, identify informants including Lothar Bisky, chairman of the Party of Democratic Socialism and successor Party of the Left. Western spies and their networks get revealed through captured documentation. Reconstruction continues today. 16,000 bags of shredded documents await reassembly. Manual puzzle work by federal employees. The Fraunhofer Institute develops computerized reconstruction systems called ePuzzler. Pilot project in 2007 demonstrates feasibility. 400 bags get processed. Scanner technology limitations and cost concerns prevent wider deployment. Additional bags containing finely shredded paper were disposed of in 1991. Those secrets stay buried forever. Physical evidence tells the surveillance story. Scent jars containing cloth samples from dissidents. Clothing. Trained dogs could track individuals using preserved odors. Hidden cameras built into cigarette cases and bookshelves. Room bugs disguised as everyday objects. Mail opening equipment for steaming letters. Tiny recording devices for phone taps. The museum at former Stasi headquarters displays these tools. Visitors see bedrooms photographed during illegal searches. Record collections, documented for political analysis. Personal items, cataloged for behavioral profiles. East Germans learned to assume surveillance. Any gathering of 10 or 12 dinner guests likely included at least one informant. Conversations became carefully coded. Humor replaced direct criticism. People developed parallel vocabularies for discussing politics. Family dinners required strategic silence on sensitive topics. Friendships operated under constant suspicion. Marriages withstood tests of loyalty versus survival. Children grew up understanding that careless words could destroy their families. Zersetzung operations targeted specific individuals for psychological destruction. Systematic reputation damage through true and false information. Engineered professional failures to undermine self-confidence. Destroyed personal relationships through manipulation. Social isolation through coordinated community rejection. The goal was mental breakdown without arrest or torture. Modern dictatorship preferred invisible oppression over public trials. Hubertus Knebe explains that the word originally meant biodegradation, decomposing human beings from within. The transition created winner and loser categories. East German bureaucrats often kept similar positions in unified administration. They had experience running local government systems. West German officials preferred taking high-level prestigious jobs. Lower-level administrative work remained with former East German personnel. Women faced massive unemployment after reunification. Traditional manufacturing jobs disappeared. Social services got restructured. Many families experienced complete economic upheaval during the adjustment period. Martin Schlaff represents successful reinvention. Austrian businessman born to Jewish refugees in 1953, traded with East Germany before reunification. Parliamentary investigations confirm his status as Stasi informant. High-ranking officers transitioned to management roles in his company empire. Herbert Kohler, Stasi commander in Dresden, transfers 170 million marks for hard drives in 1990. Months later, he works for Schlaff. Investigations conclude that Schlaff's businesses helped secure financial futures for intelligence agents and maintained operational networks. Current access rules reflect complex balancing act, justice and historical clarity versus privacy protection. Federal commissioner regulations require detailed research proposals. Broader topics like village church operations get approval more easily than fishing expeditions targeting specific individuals. University researchers can access victim names without consent since 2006. But they cannot remove documents with unredacted names. Hand copying remains mandatory at archive locations. Researchers work like medieval scribes in the digital age. 7 million Germans applied to see their files by 2015. Many discover surveillance exceeded their worst fears. Others learn their suspicions were wrong. People they trusted turn out to be informants. People they suspected were clean. David Crawford admits his intuition was completely wrong about who was working for the Stasi. The same experience happened to most East Germans. Human judgment fails when everyone becomes suspicious of everyone else. Crawford describes the moment he stopped caring. Living on Berlin's outskirts, he drives past Stasi headquarters regularly. In the 1990s, he couldn't pass without staring. At some point, he realizes he's not looking anymore. The building becomes ordinary, part of the landscape. The emotional intensity fades, other issues demand attention. Society moves forward, but the files remain. 48,000 filing cabinets of evidence waiting for future researchers to discover new patterns of collaboration and resistance. The Federal Archive absorbed the Stasi records in June 2021. Digital preservation ensures long-term access. Physical files stay at former ministry headquarters in 5 eastern federal states. Victims and researchers retain access rights. Major institutions can still check employee backgrounds until at least 2030. The transition marks the end of a unique transitional justice experiment. No other country has opened secret police files so comprehensively to public scrutiny. Contemporary implications extend beyond German history. NSA data collection capabilities dwarf Stasi documentation systems. Edward Snowden. Revelations show 5 billion mobile phone location records per day, 42 billion internet records monthly. Modern surveillance gathers more information with less effort than the Stasi ever imagined. Open Data City estimates that while Stasi archives fill 48,000 filing cabinets, one U.S. government server could store enough data to fill 42 trillion filing cabinets if printed. But digital surveillance lacks the human element. No neighborhood informants filing handwritten reports, no scent samples collected from apartment building trash, no children recruited to spy on parents. The Stasi required massive human participation to achieve total surveillance. Modern systems accomplish similar monitoring through automated data collection. Technology replaced human networks. Algorithms identify patterns instead of informants reporting suspicious behavior. The Great Silence followed reunification. East Germans chose not to pursue revenge against their former oppressors. West Germans chose rapid integration over systematic justice. The result was peaceful transition at the cost of accountability. Former Stasi members received pensions and career opportunities. Informal collaborators returned to normal lives. Victims got access to their files but limited legal recourse. Society prioritized healing over punishment. Crawford's investigation of alleged violence against former Stasi proves the restraint showed by East German citizens. Newspapers predicted widespread attacks when the first property lists were published. Interior Minister Diestel claimed incidents occurred. Systematic investigation found no confirmed cases of vigilante justice. People knew their neighbors worked for the surveillance apparatus. Apartment buildings housed obvious Stasi installations. Residents suspected what was happening. Nobody got beaten up when the truth emerged. The pension system reveals the practical side of transitional justice. Former Stasi officers kept their retirement benefits. The German state inherited responsibility for civil servant pensions, regardless of previous political loyalty. Breaking these commitments would have created legal chaos and social resentment. Practical politics required honoring financial obligations, even to former oppressors. Crawford notes that his house was purchased with money earned from analyzing Stasi pension data. Church infiltration created lasting theological questions. How many ministers collaborated with state security? Which religious leaders reported on congregation members? Protestant churches were more heavily penetrated than Catholic ones, but both faced systematic informant recruitment. Opposition movements met in churches because they offered some protection from direct state interference. Yet church leadership included collaborators who reported meeting details to Stasi handlers. Sacred spaces became surveillance locations. Youth recruitment represents the darkest aspect of informant networks. 10,000 collaborators under 18 years old. Teenagers recruited to report on family political discussions. Children trained to identify ideological deviation among classmates. Young people coerced into documenting friendship group activities. The Stasi understood that surveillance required generational participation. Breaking family loyalty was essential for comprehensive social control. Creating informants among children guaranteed access to private domestic spaces. Professional surveillance targeted specific occupations. Medical personnel reported patient political comments during treatment. Educational staff documented student ideological development. Cultural workers monitored artistic expression for subversive content. Sports organizations tracked individual political reliability. Every profession became a potential intelligence source. Career advancement depended on cooperation with state security. Professional ethics got subordinated to political surveillance requirements. The shredding operation almost succeeded. Systematic destruction of files began immediately after the wall opened. Stasi officers worked around the clock, feeding documents into industrial shredders. Citizens' committees organized to occupy regional offices and preserve evidence. Without this intervention, most documentation would have vanished. The race to save files represented ordinary people, understanding that historical truth required physical evidence. Memory alone wouldn't prove what happened. Crawford's 3 lists exposed different aspects of the surveillance system. Real estate holdings showed the institutional scope, pension records revealed individual officer identities, deep cover agents demonstrated foreign intelligence operations. Each list required different sources and investigation methods. The real estate list came from digitized records that hackers cracked in minutes using techniques from computer games. Pension data was seized by citizens, committees, and processed in West German facilities. Geographic distribution of informants followed strategic patterns. Every office, cultural society, sports club, and apartment building had at least one informant. Rural areas received the same attention as urban centers. Border regions got extra surveillance due to escape attempts. Industrial facilities were heavily monitored for economic intelligence. Universities faced concentrated infiltration to track intellectual dissent. The network achieved complete social penetration across East German territory. Personal file contents reveal surveillance obsessions. Photographs of bedroom arrangements and record collections, documentation of reading preferences and travel requests, analysis of clothing choices and social relationships, detailed reports on work performance and ideological commitment, physical descriptions and behavioral patterns. The Stasi treated every aspect of human existence as potential intelligence data, requiring analysis and storage. International connections extended surveillance beyond East German borders. Rosenholz files document operations in Western countries. British and American informants provided intelligence to East German handlers. Foreign embassy staff were recruited or monitored. International visitors faced systematic surveillance during their stays. The Stasi trained security services in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Palestine. Intelligence sharing agreements linked East German operations to Soviet bloc activities. Crawford's loss of interest reflects natural human adaptation. Extraordinary events become ordinary through repetition. The shock of discovery fades into routine knowledge. Emotional intensity cannot sustain itself indefinitely. Society develops immunity to constant outrage. People need to focus on present challenges rather than past grievances. Moving forward requires accepting that perfect justice remains impossible. But preserving evidence ensures future generations can learn from historical mistakes. Modern Germany inherited the infrastructure of surveillance while building democratic institutions. Former Stasi buildings house museums and federal offices. Surveillance equipment becomes educational displays. Secret police personnel transition to civilian careers. Informant networks dissolve into normal social relationships. The physical remnants of dictatorship serve new purposes in democratic society. But the knowledge of what happened remains available for anyone willing to examine the files. Document reconstruction continues as long-term commitment. 16,000 bags of shredded paper represent decades of remaining work. Each fragment requires manual analysis and digital cataloging. Pattern recognition software assists human operators in matching pieces. The process resembles archaeological excavation of recent history. Every reconstructed document adds details to the surveillance picture. Future discoveries will reveal additional aspects of the system that created one informant for every 6.5 citizens. The Stasi records law established international precedent for transitional justice documentation. Other countries have adapted similar approaches for dealing with authoritarian surveillance systems. Opening secret police files to public access became a model for post-conflict societies. The German experience demonstrates both possibilities and limitations of truth-telling as historical reconciliation. Access to information provides personal closure for victims while preserving evidence for researchers and educators. May 1990 marks the official end of Stasi operations, but former personnel continue living normal lives in unified Germany. Some work in private security using identical skills for corporate clients. Others find employment in business consulting or real estate development. A few become wealthy through connections made during intelligence service. Most simply retire on government pensions earned through 40 years of civil service. The surveillance apparatus dissolves, but the people who operated it remain integrated in German society. In 2013, researcher Sandra Pingel-Schliemann makes an accidental discovery that changes hundreds of lives. A 1977 Stasi directive on handling emigration applications. The document proves systematic persecution of people requesting exit permits, coercion into quitting jobs, false documentation of voluntary resignation, asset seizure from families trying to leave. Before this discovery, immigrants couldn't prove involuntary unemployment for Social Security purposes. One document unlocks compensation claims for thousands of victims. Current German memory culture spends 100 million euros annually on East German historical documentation. Public remembrance focuses on oppression, surveillance, and prominent dissidents. But this narrative leaves many former citizens feeling misrepresented. People who lived relatively normal lives without experiencing direct state violence citizens who enjoyed benefits of living outside capitalist systems. Some develop what researchers call identity of defiance, asserting the validity of their own memories against official historical narratives. The morning after reunification, 173,000 informants woke up in the same beds, in the same houses, next to the same people they had betrayed. The state that recruited them had vanished, but they remained. No trials, no punishment, no consequences, just silence. Germany chose peace over justice, stability over accountability. The price was letting the largest spy network in human history walk free. In November 2013, construction workers renovating a former Stasi training facility in Brandenburg discovered a sealed room behind a false wall. Inside, 42 boxes of personnel files marked for destruction that never got destroyed. Names, addresses, and detailed evaluations of informants from the final months of operation. 24 years after reunification, the dead were still giving up their secrets,